The viral crossover is just eyes in the UK. Trying to get
One billion people in the world tonight will go to bed hungry. 150 million people in Europe will go to bed hungry. Our best estimates for the UK are that probably 8 million people will go hungry tonight.
I done a TED talk a number of years ago and we said it's not 13, but it's got worse. I mean, there's a number of groups. We can particularly look at kids and single parent families, largely single mothers. They're not the biggest group, but the biggest growing group are people on low incomes in work. So that's due to the economy. That's due to 0-hour contracts, the gig economy, where people are just barely making a living. And current proposals around work don't offer them much protection. You know, they're not deemed to be workers, or employees with benefits. They're deemed to be contractors, so they don't get the benefits. Okay, the major difference, food insecurity is a technical measure. Mainly we use a measure devised in the US, which is variously, you can use 5 to 13 questions. It's a technical term. Whereas food poverty for me is a broader issue. It's not just a nutrition issue. This USDA, United States Department of Agriculture measure, largely focuses on nutrition and have you got enough food. For me, food poverty is wider. It's about the social issues, the social suffering people go through because they can't afford to engage in normal social activities around food, like going out to eat. 2008, we had a food shock. 2000 COVID lockdowns, we had food shocks. We've seen since then other issues such as the war in Ukraine have impacted on food prices. Food poverty has increased in the last 3 to 5 years. It's not got any better. Food banks, food charities, or what we call the canary in the mine, they're indicative of something happening, but we know from other research that food banks probably reach about 1/3, 2/3 of people who are living in food poverty or food insecure. Not everybody gets to a food bank for various reasons. What they do is, with the best will in the world, they help people with a little bit of food to tide them over in times of hunger.
My name is Johan Ekelund. I am the referral agency coordinator here at Hackney Food Bank, as well as running the Hackney Giving Van, which we're in now. My roles include being the go-between between the referral agents that send people to us and the food bank, so they have a point to contact if they have any questions. This van I take into different parts of Hackney 4 days a week to be a bit more easily accessible for people. We have 6 bricks and mortar distribution centers during the week. Some people might have difficulty getting to these centers, so we also take this van out just to make it a bit more easier. It can be for people with disabilities that might not be able to make our normal centers. People with anxieties, the centers can be quite busy. This van tend to be a bit more quiet, which is nice. It's also a nice way to be out in the community and people to see us. So if people need support, they often come up and ask how they can access support within the community.
So I'm Jenna and I'm Head of Fundraising here at Hackney Food Bank, so Head of Fundraising and Communications, so it's my job to make sure that we don't run out of anything. So we've definitely seen an increase in numbers in the last year. So in 2025 we provided the equivalent to around 308,000 meals for people experiencing hardship. That's a 17% increase on the year before. Certainly when COVID happened, demand for our food bank went up quite considerably. Lots of people found themselves hungry and struggling to survive. So we see people from all demographics coming to our food banks. They're young people, they're older people, a lot of them are working people, a very high percentage of people with disabilities. So we have real problems with the disability benefits in this country. But yeah, a lot of working multiple jobs. We see a lot of people who are in key worker roles, so people like nurses and people who are in caring roles, security jobs, people who aren't earning the London living wage, who simply can't afford the high cost of living.
Food banks don't solve the systemic issue of food insecurity or food poverty, which is actually basically a resource and income issue. They can't, because of their position, they're mostly charities, they can't go back and systemically change, and that's really a role of government. Previous governments and current Labour government have failed on this. Absolutely don't understand it, don't get it. The current government are now, like the last Conservative government, waging a war on welfare and austerity, which is going to make food poverty and food insecurity worse.
Boris Johnson has denied claims made by his former top advisor that he waved aside warnings of a planned drinks party at Downing Street during the first coronavirus lockdown. Dominic Cummings said he'd be prepared to swear on oath that it happened and it would mean that Boris Johnson had misled Parliament.
The reality of what was the distinction between what we call the deserving and the undeserving poor, which we still find in food poverty in the UK today. The current government still have policies around who deserves help and who doesn't deserve help, and we set barriers for people to receive help who are suffering from food poverty. I mean, we saw food beginning to emerge as a social status. I mean, the epicenter of that was French cuisine. So the rich people here in the UK, or particularly in London, employed French chefs. So and food has always had this cachet of, it distinguishes people.
I'm putting together winter care bundles for local homelessness charities, refugee charities and food banks. It's definitely a systemic issue, and I think whilst it's important that people donate to their food banks where they can and where they can afford to, and a strong community is where real change happens, I think it's absolutely systemic, and I don't believe it's a long-term solution, especially not for the working class to be relied upon for food safety for other working class people. I think it can and has to work in tandem with political change. And the political change can only come when other people feel supported in their industry. So if people can't afford their basic food or personal hygiene products, then they're not going to have, say, the energy or the means to fight, the further systemic issues, because they're so focused on, I need to just survive. So by doing that as a first port of call, I think it then creates change, but it has to work in tandem with political change and accountability from big companies, big and small government as well, but also policy change which holds billionaires, multi-millionaires and huge corporations to higher tax payments as well. They can afford to do it, and at the moment the working class is being penalised, and we're being taxed at a much higher rate in comparison to our earnings. So I think absolutely it's not a long-term solution, but I think when people can afford to donate, they should, because it helps create that political change that we do need. It helps give people a base layer or a base level to be able to say, oh, actually, I have the energy to fight this now.
People that don't earn enough money where they're working, they are working, but the money that they make, their wages, is just not enough to pay for all their bills, pay for their food, looking after their children. So they need to come to us as a final resort.
And if you think that the average rent for a two-bedroom place here in Hackney is £2,400 a month for a two-bedroom place, you can see how regular people on low incomes are really struggling to get by.
Growing up in an overcrowded house and a troubled family environment, Josh from Torfeen, South Wales, didn't have the best start in life, and he was taken into foster care at the age of 16. I was starving for about a week. I didn't have any food and I had really bad anxiety, but it came to the point where I had to ask help from the food bank.
My parents had scraped together all they had, and it had just been enough to send me to school, but not quite enough for lunch.
When Sarah's partner recently moved in with her, it should have been a happy time for them, but informing the council of this change to their circumstances resulted in a delay to their benefits, leaving them in desperate situations.
I'm a single dad living with my daughter on a council block in relative poverty. The area where I live in Kent is characterised by low education levels, gangs, drugs and dilapidating properties.
We are both on low wage, and we were left without any benefits for nearly 2 months. We found it really difficult, explains a 35-year-old mother of 2. We didn't know where our next meal was going to come from, and we were really struggling.
So when we were going through secondary school, we didn't have, like we were doing we were using food banks quite a lot, just because my family were working, both my parents are working like full-time jobs, but because we were quite a bigger family, we didn't have enough, they weren't making enough to look after us, but then pay bills and stuff like that. So both me and my brother had jobs when we were 16. We worked as like bartenders and like glass collectors, not bartenders, but we worked to help made additional income for like our families and stuff. And then when I moved to uni, my student finance didn't cover, it covered my rent, but it didn't cover like food shopping or travel and stuff. So I had a part-time, I've worked as a part-time job for all 3 years I've been at uni, just because London's quite expensive as a city, which isn't a new thing, but like people say, oh, it's you don't realise it until you live here that it actually is really expensive. And I'm one person, it boggles my brain that my mum was having to pay all this extra stuff. Food shopping just for me is expensive, let alone a family of 5. It was a bit crazy. So it's been quite hard. And then inconsistencies in jobs as well. You're always constantly stressing about is my paycheck going to cover food shopping for the next 4 or 5 weeks, or is it do you know what I mean? Because where things increase so differently, 1 minute the tubes are really cheap, the next minute they're deciding to put it up again, or if there's tube strikes and stuff, that makes it more expensive because when you take 1 tube you have to take 3, or you have to take 3 tubes on a bus, or whatever. So it can be quite hard, especially for someone who I don't get any outside money other than my student finance. I don't I'm here, but I'm financially independent. I don't earn any money outside of work or student finance, so it can be quite hard to try and make it last when it's not as much, if that makes sense. There's not a lesson, they don't teach you these things at school. They don't teach you, oh, this is how you budget things and this is how you apply for if you need loans, this is how you apply for loans, or if you, do you know what I mean? There's no teaching it, so you all of a sudden just have to know it, and you're like, what? Our food bank was quite limited in what it was. I noticed that I only really noticed we were using them because we had the same dinner for 2 weeks in a row, and I was like, huh, we've got loads of soup and pasta. Why have we got loads of soup and pasta? Mum was like, oh, we've just gone down to the food bank or whatever, and I was like, oh, okay. But again, I was so young, I don't really remember too much about it. But so we were quite young, so I don't remember loads. But I think my mum also, she didn't want us to know how badly we were in trouble, I think. She knew that both me and my brother would worry about it. So I knew we were on universal credits, but I don't think I knew what the ins and outs. It wasn't until I got older and I've seen other people's experiences of it, and I've seen they do a lot of the time they've done documentaries and stuff. I've seen some of them and I'm like, it's actually ridiculous how poorly people working class people get treated. It's just not great. So yeah, we had universal credit for a while, or just I noticed that my mum was going without, so that me and my brother had dinner and stuff, and I can remember Christmases where we didn't have a lot. Young people are more at risk of it purely just because I feel there's not as much help for younger people. Younger people, younger single people, I feel once you get married and you have kids, there's more benefits, but especially uni students, a lot of places you just do student finance and that's it. But then for some people, student finance doesn't cover anything.
I mean, the solution is, in my terms, is pretty simple. You set minimum wage or living wage, and you give people, and you know, living wage in London is very difficult with rental issues, but that's no excuse why we should still be doing it. We should still be pursuing it.
So over the course of the past year, we've noticed that our numbers have been rising really sharply, and we were unable to keep up with the huge demand that we were seeing. And that's partly because people were coming from neighbouring boroughs, and there are food banks in all of those neighbouring boroughs, places like Islington and Haringey and Tower Hamlets. So in October we made the difficult decision just to restrict our service just to people from Hackney.
So many people aren't aware, and to be honest, I really wasn't aware until I started seeing more things online of like, oh, like this is what you can get. I hadn't even considered that people might need toothbrushes. An app that I use is called Bank the Food, and it's basically an app where you can go on, type in your postcode, and you are given a list of like the local food banks in your area. Or you click on one and it will tell you the food that they urgently need. So that's things like, it's always long life food. So tinned meats, tinned vegetables, tinned fruits, and hygiene products. And it will tell you exactly what they need, and it will tell you exactly where to donate to as well.
How can you help the food banks around the UK? Donate. When you go to the supermarket, look at special prices, buy a couple of things, and a lot of supermarkets have a little basket when you go out. Pop things in there. We need long life things. We need rice, pasta, toiletries, sanitary products. It's great when you donate things. However, the best thing you can do is to donate money. If you donate money, we can get 25% extra via gift aid. Also, when you donate money, we can bulk buy things from wholesalers, which means we can get better prices than you can at the supermarkets, so the money will last longer. But anything you do is truly appreciated, so keep doing it. Thank you.